Hello, Steelers Nation, and welcome to a season concluding episode number 139 of the Still City Insider podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Jeremy Ritz, alongside my co-host today, Bo Marchionte. Bo, welcome back to the show.
Jeremy, thanks for having me back. It's always good to talk to you and good to talk some Steelers football.
Absolutely. So it's exciting that we're getting to talk Steelers football, but not quite like this because the Steelers, it was another one and done exit from the postseason. Getting embarrassed at the hands of the Ravens. And I know a bit of time has passed from that sting for me personally as a fan. But let's start episode 139 there. Thoughts on that debacle in Baltimore?
Yeah, I thought the thing that stuck out to me the most was the last time the Steelers had the ball was with 6 minutes, 6 seconds left in the fourth quarter, and they never got the ball back. And the Ravens basically ended the game in victory formation. I thought, absent of everything else that has been talked about or brought up during the collapse of the final month of the season, I think the defense not being able to shut them down with 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter to get the ball back. We knew even if they got the ball back, a win wasn't likely, but I just think what's the word I'm looking for? Just the demeanor, if we all know, you want to get the ball back, you want to be able to stop the Ravens. And I think that was the biggest blemish when I looked at that game was their inability to stop the run when they pride themselves on the defense. We know the offense is a work in progress, but the collapse of the defense, especially a formidable defense, at least we think it's formidable. I think that was the biggest issue I had with that loss in Baltimore.
Yeah, and let's kind of hang on that topic for a moment because the defense, if we look back on the season, at the beginning of the year, it looked like this was an elite unit. They were able to stop the run, defend the pass, but everything just kind of crescendoed there at the end, giving up 200 plus yards. And that run that Derrick Henry had, I mean, I probably speak on behalf of all Steelers Nation that was just a foreboding signal of potentially what's to come in the future.
Yeah, it was disappointing the way that they lost. I didn't give much credence to the idea that they would come out of Baltimore with the win just for the way that they played. And I just think Baltimore's a more talented team. But I think the way they went about losing, that was, I thought, brought a lot of attention to, all the critiques or all the issues that we see with the Steelers. And, again, 10-3, they finished 10-7, then they lose first round embarrassingly to the Ravens. So there's a lot of work this offseason, a lot of question marks. I know the fan base is tired of Mike Tomlin, or at least that's the rally cry right now, especially after the way the season ended. I don't have the answers to where they're going to go or what the solutions are, but just looking at this team defensively, that's where you're going to have to hang your hat. We know the defense is ahead of the offense, and that took some time to change. I mean, it wasn't too long ago, 18, 19, or 17 when they played Jacksonville. That was the last time I thought the Steelers had a realistic chance of winning a playoff game, and that was with Ben and Bell and Brown, and that offense was potent. It took some time to get the defense to come around. Now the defense has come around, and now we're waiting for the offense to kind of catch up. So it's a hard job to do. Get them back to where they need to be one of the best teams, and we just haven't seen that for quite a bit of time, and that's what's led to the frustration of this fan base. Is this isn't an institution where playoffs is acceptable. It's Super Bowl or bust, and we know that's why that's the top topic is they've lacked that luster of playoff success recently.
Yeah. All great points. And let's talk about the Tomlin component there. And, and looking at just the stagnation of this team in terms of when they get into the postseason. You brought up that game against Jacksonville. That was probably their legitimate shot to make a real push. They had a great team there. But, in trying to find trends or patterns that are leading to these downfalls, a lot of it, you want to chalk up to every year is different. But the fact that these games all follow a similar script to where they get down early, they're in the hole, and then they have to battle their way back, and then the defense just kind of implodes. That seems to have been the narrative that comes out of all these playoff games. And you have to, and I think this is where a lot of the frustration comes in with Tomlin is, if you're the lead guy, you're the front guy, and that this has been an issue dating back to, whenever this streak started. When are we going to see tangible results of improvement? Now, maybe you could say that this year's team wasn't as talented, but I guess kind of hit on that and what your thoughts are from that perspective.
Yeah, Jeremy, what you brought up is ideally what has happened to the Steelers is, they get into these games, they're down early, and then it's catch up. I mean, going back to that game in Jacksonville, I was just looking at the numbers. I mean, Ben had 5 touchdowns, 4+100 yards passing, against Blake Bortles, but the run game, it was Leonard Fournette and TJ Yeldon, and it was a ground game component where the Steelers once again suffered. I guess all revolves around Tomlin and what's expected of him to get this team ready to play. And I don't know if he feels too secure in his place where he kind of knows, listen, there's going to be no what's the word I'm looking for? He's not. I mean, he's going to answer Mr. Rooney. That's part of it. But there's outlying that, he's kind of the king of the castle. He's the alpha, and there's not much that's going to dictate. And he knows he's coming back. He knows that's the way that Steelers do it. I don't know if he's kind of finds comfort in that security. I guess where I'm going, and knowing that he wants to win. Let's not question his,
Yeah.
and he's a great leader, and we know all the positives that Mike Tomlin brings. But I think maybe that job security is one of the things that maybe he relies on too much. And it doesn't mean, but going into these playoff seasons where they have these collapses, I mean, that's beyond my pay grade. We know they play well during the season, but I think since 2019 or 2018, Tomlin has had a 3-game stretch of losing games, and that's a pretty astonishing factor. Despite him being able to, I mean, we all know he's never had a losing season, but to think that each of those seasons they've succumbed to a 3-game losing streak. This past year, 4 games, and we know the collapse of December. So I think that's just an intriguing part where everything's going well, or vice versa, things aren't going well, and he has the team rebound and they play great football. Vice versa, there's always that part of the season that kind of collectively makes them epically fail. And I think absent of all the other things going on, there's always that ugly, a little bit of ugly. We've seen it with George Pickens. We saw the report out of the Athletic that it's possible he was late for the Chiefs game on Christmas. We know the Antonio Brown situation, Deontay Johnson. It's just weird that these guys in this type of organization where everything seems to be on the outside perfect. They love playing for Tomlin. This is a great organization, but there's this underlying ugly to everything, and it kind of comes out when losses start to stack up. If they win, those usually are hidden. But I think that the way that the season ended, what Najee had to say, not really finger pointing amongst the players, but them not publicly calling anyone out individually, but calling people out as a whole. And then I think that's reflective of Tomlin and what he's doing. That's reflective of the coaches. And that's an internal thing. They're never going to privilege us to know what's going on unless
Yeah.
a player really comes out and speaks it. But absent of that, it's a weird dynamic in terms of the franchise, how they're looked upon, and then kind of some of the ugly that we see when these seasons end by specific players. And I think that goes back to drafting when they get these guys in interviews, where are they missing that PowerPoint where maybe the character isn't there, but they're kind of bypassing that for talent. And maybe they got to do a better job of finding out, the character of these young men when they bring them in, and the long-term analysis of how these guys are going to factor in when things aren't going their way.
Yeah, all great points there, Bo. And one of the things that I thought about is in his season-ending press conference, he says that he embraces this discomfort because this leads to growth. But I think ultimately, for me, just kind of looking at how this has transpired with Tomlin since he started here, is that you're right. You have to grow. You have to get better, and it means taking a hard look at the way you've approached your career. And I know there's a lot of reports that it's not Terrell Austin who runs the defense, that it's actually Mike Tomlin. And
Yeah.
we don't know if that's true. Jerry Dulac has reported that in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But that is there a level of micromanagement that happens on Tomlin's part where instead of just being the global overseer of the team, that he's too much in the minutia to be a leader of men, as they call it? And could that be something that's holding him back from taking that step as being his best level of coaching? Because something's got to change.
Yeah, something has to change. All the points that you brought up are valid. They think that there's something that's on the top of everybody's mind is when you kind of really dig into this team and Tomlin's role is he the actual defensive coordinator? We know that's his forte. We know Austin runs the defense, but how much of Austin is really involved? Uh, I don't know. It's a tricky. Listen, I wish I had the answers, and if I did, maybe I'd be hired by the Steelers. Um, it's easy to sit on the outside and critique and try to figure it out. Uh, I don't know. Tomlin's role, and if you're around the team, it seems like there's a good vibe. It seems like, we time and time again, the players come in, they want to play for Tomlin, they believe in what Tomlin's doing, but somewhere there's a wrinkle of failure. Jeremy, I really believe it just stems from, this team was in its heyday with Ben and Palomalu and all these guys. I mean, we could go down the names of
Yeah.
all those guys on the last Super Bowl team, or even the team that they lost to in Green Bay, in Dallas. Just all those guys are no longer with the team. I mean, granted, that was almost 15, but I'm just saying it's that transition period, and it's a franchise base, a fan base that's very, very hungry for that success that they've tasted during the end of Cowher's career, the beginning of Tomlin's. I mean, figure Tomlin had 2 Super Bowls in 3 years. One, no year, then back to the Super Bowl with Green Bay. So we got spoiled. The fan base got spoiled, saying, "Hey, this Tomlin guy, he came in, he's hot." You know what I
Yeah.
mean? He's 2 Super Bowls, and at the point you think Ben, wow, how many is Ben going to get? It's this. You're starting to think of like a whole nother level that they were never able to achieve. But I just think it goes down to this team is not as good is what they are. And it's Tomlin's biggest curse, and it's his biggest asset is he can coach the ugly out of this team, but eventually the ugly shows up. And that's, to me, that's the bottom line of this whole thing is the team isn't as good as we think. I was talking with somebody the other day, and I used the Philadelphia Eagles office as an example. Is there one person on the Steelers offense that you could say could bench somebody for the Eagles? I just think that speaks volumes where you're basically going through 11 players. And, you might say Freiermuth over Dallas Goedert. I mean, that's a 50-50, depending on who you're talking to. But I don't think there's one position where you say, hey, yeah, this is a slam dunk. I mean,
Yeah.
George Pickens isn't starting over Devontae Smith or AJ Brown in my mind.
Yeah.
So it's just an echo of that. Barkley, the Najee, Hurts, the Wilson. You go to the tackles. I mean, our bookends are nowhere comparable to the bookends that the Eagles have. So I just think it's a lack of talent. They're trying, but it's hard. And the last years of Colbert, the money wasn't there. They're starting to accumulate that cap. We've seen Omar Khan, the new GM. He's a lot more willing to kind of deal and break the mold of the Steelers or that old stagnant attitude of the old way of the NFL where, you just, you use the draft, you didn't spend money, you didn't trade draft capital, that was forbidden. But now we've seen that it's almost like fantasy football. I mean, there's nothing sacred in terms of cap or picks or players. And
Yeah.
we've seen any player, and no matter the salary, the cap of a team, everything's on the table. And I think the Steelers have to kind of embark on that role to kind of stay with the modern NFL. I think the old ways of doing it, and even the old way, Pittsburgh is a town where we think of Franco and running the ball and the steel curtain. It's just not the NFL right now. It's
Yeah.
it's you got to have a quarterback. You got to fly high with the passing game. You got to have a good defense, nonetheless. But I think the Steelers and the Najee 1 yard per carry and the first down Najee 1 yard, first down Najee. It's just so repetitive, not rewarding. And I think to me that's one of the biggest dissatisfactions of watching the Steelers is just the lackluster uh, way of doing things in terms of what they do on offense. But it goes back to I don't really think the offense is that good to begin with.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. We're talking about talent and then the salary cap here, which brings into question the Steelers free agents this offseason. And then on the back end of it, let's talk some preliminary draft talk. But when you look at the free agents this team's going to have, who are you prioritizing and signing? Is there anybody that jumps out to you?
No, I mean, to be honest with you, nobody stands out where this is a must-have re-signing guy. I mean, you could probably look at Russell or Justin just as good because it's the quarterback position. I think Tomlin feels secure having a veteran like Russell Wilson in-house. That's just my perception. I could be wrong. I think that's why they, even with Justin Fields at 4-2 and having one of his best years statistically, they elected to go with Wilson, who was when he arrived, he said, Russell was in pole position. And as we come to learn that he was in pole position, he took the job, when he was healthy. So there's nobody that stands out. in free agent, and I think that just goes back to the talent base. If you really coveted these guys, you'd be talking about, hey, they're going to franchise this guy if they can't resign him, or this guy, and they had that past issues. We saw it with Le'Veon Bell when they couldn't sign him, he sat out a season, then he goes to the Jets. So, that type of player doesn't exist for the Steelers. So I wish I had better answers. It's not that I'm trying to elude it or not
Yeah.
answer it. I just don't think there's any, big free agent to say for the Steelers that they have to resign. Yeah, you want to keep the team intact, but if any of these guys aren't on the roster next year, I don't think anything changes. I mean, they're probably going to go 9-8, 9-7-1, 10-7, 8-9. You know what I mean? Nothing's going to change in that realm. So, they have to bring in some talent. And we saw it last year, the flirtation. Were they going to bring in Brandon Ayuk? Were they going to get a deal done? I mean, every day in camp, every day, it was just a talk and talk of Brandon Ayuk. And it seemed close, but it never, came to realization. And the offense never really got over that hump. You can't survive with George Pickens and Calvin Austin. It's no
Yeah.
disrespect to them. They're just, when you look at the landscape of, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle. You're talking all these teams have so many versatile pieces, elite pieces, and the Steelers don't have those. So besides free agents on their own team, I would be looking at all other teams, free agents and try to kind of collect as much talent via that way rather than kind of keeping a lot of their options that are already in house.
Yeah. So, and you brought up T. Higgins. You're hearing that speculated that, hey, that could be a potential target that the Steelers pursue, but you're assuming that he would want to come here and play in this offense. So what would you prioritize in terms of free agents from other teams and then the draft? And what do you think that it's going to take? And can it be done in one offseason to get this team in position to win a playoff game? Because I know you just said, 9-8, 10-7, and I could just see the audience watching saying that's not good enough. I mean, what
It's
what what
not
can
good
be
enough.
done?
I listen. It's going to be a miraculous turnaround if they're able to kind of jumpstart this team to be elite from this year. But you know what? When you go into the draft, we're going to talk about players, and there's going to be players that go from round 1 through 7, undrafted guys that become successes. That's the unknown. Nobody. You look at the Texans taking C.J. Stroud. The success of the Washington, Jaden Daniels. Those are things you expect the best, but when it really comes to, fruition, and these guys are elite players, it does change the trajectory of a franchise. The Steelers, if they're lucky enough to find a guy, no matter what the position is, that can become one of those type of players, it's going to help. I don't think they become elite next year. I don't. I think we'll be asking a lot. Just say they bring Russell Wilson in and they keep the team intact from what we see, and they say they bring in a T. Higgins. I mean, is T. Higgins the guy that puts this team over the top? I don't know about that. And listen, I hate to say this, but I mean, I would expect more of the same. I don't see how you can get around that particular fact. They're sitting 21st in the draft, so they're going to have to move up. This is not a quarterback deep draft unless, again, Quinn Ewers or one of these guys just develop into an amazing prospect that everybody overlooked, and the Steelers get lucky. Absent of that, you're looking at Russell, Justin. I don't think Sam Darnold in this offense. I think he takes a
No.
giant step back. I think that would be one of the worst signings if they would go after, and I don't think the Steelers would do that. I think at least my mindset right now, what is it, the 16th of January, is they're going to do what they can to bring Fields or Russell back, especially Russell. I just think they feel comfortable with him, and then go with a young guy, in the draft, or how they're going to acquire young talent. But there's a lot of weird free agents out there. You look at Jameis Winston's and all these oddball type names. The Steelers were kind of in that hat last year where, Pickett, we knew what Pickett was. He wasn't the answer. And then they bring in Justin, and then eventually, Pickett wants out and they bring in Russ. So anything's possible. I just think, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but, I just doubt next year that we're talking, in January, that where the Steelers are at the peak of the season and they're dominating the playoffs. I just think it's going to be another season where Tomlin exceeds expectations in terms of wins. but the team doesn't exceed expectations when it comes to a playoff success. And that's just I think the base of the talent on that roster right now.
Great. And then my last question for you here today, Bo, is does the bottom have to fall out on this team to where it's a 5-12 season, a 3-14 season? Does that need to happen? If you go back to, I think the last time this occurred was when we got Ben.
Yeah.
But is that what it's going to take in order for them to get that elite level pedigree player to
Yeah.
start the next generation of Steelers football?
It's weird you say that because my friends who are Steeler fans, that's my exact message to them. If you want to see change, you're going to have to deal with the consequences of a complete collapse of what you complain and you get angry at 10-7 and the way things are going, but bear witness to 3-14 and you don't have a hope. But that's when things are going to get real, and you're taking a lot of trash talk from Browns fans because they're winning more games than you. That's the thing that they don't want to deal with, but they, because they have that 10-7 playoff success, so it keeps them relevant. It will take ugly, and I think, and it goes back to Tomlin. What point does Tomlin want to stick around? And I think that's why I think Russell stays. I don't think Tomlin wants to go through the transition of a rebuild. I think that's the question to propose to Tomlin. Would they go through a rebuild? We mentioned, or people mentioned, like a trade of TJ Watt and all these other avenues. I don't think Tomlin's built for the mindset of a rebuild for a team. But that complacency, that lack of a rebuild, that lack of a collapse keeps this team. It keeps them right in the middle, keeps them picking what I think they picked 20, 22nd, 20th, 21st, 22nd. We've seen it year after year. They're right there basically in the same window. It's a great thing if you're any other team. You look at the Bills, they're having success. The Lions are enjoying Dan Campbell right now. They're on top of the world. They're winning games and they're getting to top seeds. But even Sean McDermott in Buffalo has kind of gotten to that point where, okay, Sean, this is great. We're back. We're absent of the Kelly days, Jim Kelly days. We're back on top. But how many times can we lose to Patrick Mahomes? How many times can we lose to not make it to the top of the mountain?
Yeah.
And that's a fan base. But the Steelers, again, it's Tomlin's success that has kind of led them to the frustration. But without him, I guess what it is, plain and simple, Jeremy, is you get rid of Tomlin, you bring in a coach, you hope for the best. But you could get Dan Campbell, or you could get Brandon Staley.
Yeah.
Dan Campbell, you're excited, you're thrilled. Yeah. Oh, this is the best movie we ever made. Where you get Brandon Staley, who has a stacked roster but epically fails to deliver, and then you got to go back and you got to chase another coach and all these other things. So, it's be careful what you wish for. And I wish I had better answers. People are probably gonna be like, "Man, why'd you get this guy on today?" But I just think
this is great, Bo.
I just think in the realness of it, when you on the outside looking in, it's just a great organization. It's a great franchise. They just lack the talent, and that's hard to come by. You just can't be the best every single time. You just can't. But it's been a long time coming, and the absence of playoff wins is definitely a reflection of Tomlin, and he has to do better. And until we see better, the fan base is gonna be very disappointed and frustrated and mad. And he's going to be the epicenter of a lot of frustration. So again, total collapse is, I think, the only way Mike Tomlin is, sent in a different direction than what the Rooneys wanted.
Yeah. And to your point about Dan Campbell, I think his first year with the Lions, would they win 3 or 4 games? So just because you're bringing somebody new in, I think that the ultimate answer that we're going to wrap this podcast up with is that in order for this team, it seems, to take that next step, it's going to take somewhat of a rebuild, and to have that year where, man, we're terrible.
It has to be. You have to rip the Band-Aid off. That's the only way you're going to get through this, Steeler fans, is you're going to have to see some ugly. I think, Tomlin, I think his contract runs to 2027. And I don't know if it was his last opening press conference this year or the year before in Latrobe, where he said he knows he's closer to the end of this thing than he is to the beginning. There's not another 15 years at the end of the Steelers cycle. It's just not the way it's going to happen. So he knows it's coming, but listen, you got TJ Watt, he's in his 30s now, still an elite player, but you're starting looking, how much, maybe Cam got a year left. So it's those iconic figures on defense, no Hayward, Watt's a year older. you look at Nick Herbert's a great talent,
Yeah.
but he's playing, he's not a TJ Watt. That's what it is when you really look at this team, they're a good team, but they're not a great team. And they don't have great talent. They have good players,
Yeah.
but they don't have elite players. Watt probably you could say is the only elite guy on that entire roster, 11 on offense, the other 10 on defense. So I think that speaks volumes to where they got to go. They got to find better talent, and talent brings wins.
Yeah. Well, Bo, I think you just named the episode there. 139 is going to be Rip the Band-Aid Off. And so we appreciate you guys watching. Please like and subscribe. Bo, where can we check out your stuff? Working on anything you want everybody to know about?
Yeah, collegepro.com is where we put our content on. We're a big draft based website. Next week we'll be heading down, or I'll be heading down to the Shrine game, and then the Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl, and then this off season begins, another draft season, and another exciting off year where the one thing about I know how much time we have, but the one thing about the off season, there's only one team that's going to be happy, and that's the team that hoists the Lombardi. The other 31 teams are all going to be disappointed. All the franchise bases, the fan base is going to be disappointed. But that's the best thing about the National Football League. You have a cap and you have 7 picks, and that's why I love the NFL so much. Is it's not, hey, this is the Yankees versus the Pirates in terms of salary cap or all this other stuff. It's 7 picks. Do your homework. Find the talent, bring these guys in, find a culture that's winning, and do it. So we're halfway there with the Steelers. We just need some better.
Yep. Well, we got something to look forward to with the draft.
Yeah.
But that's going to do it. Episode 139. Give Bo some love in the comments, and we will see you back here next week for episode 140 of the Steel City Insider. Bo, have a great one.
Later, Jeremy.
All right. Take care, man.